Well, thanks for coming. Welcome to Cisco Live, the IT leadership track. What I planned to share with you this morning was just a little bit about what I've learned in the time that I've been CIO at Cisco and before that at IBM, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And really, honestly, it sort of applies to any kind of function that you might be leading in an IT organization. So first, a little bit about me, some background. There was a period of time where I thought I might go into entertainment, and I spent some time on movie sets. And when I was in college, I worked as an intern at the David Letterman Show and the Conan O'Brien Show. But ultimately, I realized I really wanted to work in tech. And after I graduated, I moved out to Silicon Valley on the west coast of the United States and got a job working at Walmart.com. Became a Microsoft certified systems engineer, then got into networking, then went over to IBM. I was at IBM for quite a while and eventually became CIO for the last 4 years that I was at IBM. And now I've been at Cisco for about 3.5 years as the CIO of Cisco. So let's talk about what actually is the job of a CIO. Is that a made-up job? What do you do as the CIO? So if I think about the things you sort of have to deal with, you've got to manage a budget. You've got to deal with cybersecurity and regulatory obligations. You have to manage your vendors, manage all of your contracts for third-party software and otherwise. Maybe present to the audit committee. Make sure you're not getting hacked. Manage your stakeholders that are always asking you to do a lot more than you have capacity to do, and maintain operational excellence, right? You can't have outages. So let's call those sort of the risk management category of stuff. Those are the bad things that cannot happen. Then you've just got to manage your organization, right? In my case, the IT department's about 10,000 people. I think I have 12 direct reports, and so you're just doing the job of a manager. You're addressing a certain amount of tech debt. Unless your company went into business yesterday, all of us are going to have things that are old and that we need to replace or wish we didn't have. And you got to come up with some sort of a strategy and a plan for what you're going to get done this year. Let's call that stuff the basics. So these are the things that you have to deal with no matter what company or what kind of organization you're at. If you're at a bank, or you're at a government, or you're at a tech startup, or you're at a food supply company, whatever it is, I think this list is going to be pretty consistent and the same. So if that's the same everywhere, then how do you make IT a differentiator? How do you make IT your secret weapon that helps define what it's like to work in your organization and help create a culture where talented people want to work and where great people can do their best work? You do that by, these are the things that will differentiate you. By focusing on the culture. Your culture is really the only unique thing that you have. Over time, people can steal your technology. Or they can try to. That's just kind of what happens. But it's pretty difficult to steal somebody's culture. And leading with the experience, making IT a servant function that exists to help everybody in the company, and by designing the future of work in a forward-thinking way. But you can only do those things if numbers 1 through 9 are well taken care of. If you're constantly having outages or cybersecurity problems or audit findings, it doesn't leave any room to focus on the things that are going to be different and make you special, right? So, basically, you got to manage your budget, make sure you don't have bad audit findings, and make sure you don't have any cybersecurity incidents. And so then you can focus on these other things. And we spend a lot of time thinking about IT as a driver of culture change, and really trying to position IT as the function that enables everyone to be their best and to do their best work. So when you come into a new organization, whether it's large or small, there's a pretty common set of things that you probably want to do to understand what you've got, what's going well, what's not going well, what do you need to change, how do you get everybody aligned. And so this is sort of generally the sequence that I would recommend doing those things in. First step would be bring the team together. Let people tell you what they think could be better, what could be improved, what's not going well. Have a retrospective. And then work together to co-create your purpose, your vision, your mission statement. And that's important to do as a team, because then it's not you just telling everybody, here's what our mission's going to be. It's something that we created together. Share that with the entire organization. Develop your roadmap. Set some KPIs or OKRs around how you're going to measure whether you're making progress or not. And then create a culture of innovation and accountability, which is really about creating the emotional safety necessary for people to take calculated risks. And that's really about listening to people and having a culture where people are not afraid to tell you what they think, and especially if they think you're wrong. You need that input to have a healthy organization. So when I first became CIO of Cisco, I brought the team together. This was the template that I used to have the workshop with the team over 3 days and say, coming out of here in 3 days, we're going to have these things filled in. Our vision, our mission, our values, the goals for the year, our objectives or OKRs, and then how are we going to do that, right? What's the strategy? We, by the way, had a live illustration artist come to those workshops and help document those things. That can be a helpful artifact to have afterwards, because you can share that with the whole organization. You can hang it up in the office. This is just one of one that we had about culture, but you get the idea. So let's just take a minute and talk about IT and why it matters and why it's more important than ever. And it's not just a back office expense that you wish you didn't have. Those days are long over. It's really an enabler for the business. It plays a very large role in answering the question, what is it like to work here? It defines culture is a function of how work gets done. And the shortest distance to engaging employees is what's in their hand or what's on the desk. So how well we're doing our jobs in IT is not trivial. It's really core to creating a culture of high performance, of operational excellence, of where talented people want to work. And so, we take this very seriously at Cisco. The quality of the work that we're delivering in IT is a signal to the employees. And depending on the quality of work we're producing, we're either telling people that we really value them, or if things are not good, we're telling them that we don't really care about them or their time. And so this is why it's so important to have professional pride in operational excellence in IT. To have people that really love what they do for a living, that when they do something, there's pride in the work. And even in the things that no one's going to see, there's nobody inspecting it, that just comes from within. It's in the work, whether it's cabling in a data center or how you code something on the back end. That doesn't really have a lot to do with how much you pay someone. That comes from hiring people who are passionate about what they do for a living and they love their job. And it's so important to create these really good user experiences for our users. And people's expectations of what is a good experience is a moving target, because that's being informed by what they see in their personal lives and in mobile experiences and all these kind of great frictionless SaaS products that you see out there. And so this idea that today's best is tomorrow's minimum. You always have to be iterating and improving. And so people are having these great experiences in their personal lives, and sometimes the experience at work is just not that great. And it's just not okay to have these great experiences in your personal life and these really difficult enterprise complex experiences at work. Just because it's enterprise doesn't mean it has to be bad. So our mission in Cisco IT is to enable everyone at the company to do the best work of their lives. It's one of our core values is to produce work that we're proud of. which is a higher standard than just getting things done. You know, are we proud of this thing that we're putting out? If we're not, we ought to really think about why are we putting it out there if we're not proud of it. And you know, the idea that every minute that somebody spends struggling or fighting with a system or completing some process or completing some task, that's a minute taken away from them doing the thing that they were hired to do, the thing that they want to do, the thing that they feel fulfilled doing. And so we have to take really seriously these things that are detractors from doing the actual job that a person wants to be doing. When people get to do what they like doing, they'll be good at it. And so as the saying goes, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. You know, it's good for the whole organization. So our vision statement for Cisco IT in 2025 is to be a user experience-led, AI-powered IT organization. Our values are important. They should guide us. They should be stable. They should really not change very often. And for us, those are trust, transparency, having passion for your craft, and kindness. You know, we want to work with people who are kind, passionate about what they do, and believe in our purpose. If we surround ourselves with those kinds of people, we're going to be successful in whatever problems we happen to be trying to solve. This is our strategy. We lead with the user experience in everything that we do, even things that on the surface of it may not seem like they have an experience or need any design work. We embrace agile ways of working. You know, this is about standardizing on an agile way of working across the whole org, creating well-formed teams, and some other things that I'll talk about in a minute. And using AI as a force multiplier, or a way for people to be able to do 10x what they could normally do without AI. These are our top-level goals for Cisco IT in 2025. That 50% of everything we do in the IT department should really be assisted by AI in some way, and we should try to reduce the amount of friction or difficulty in the environment for our users by 50%. And I'll talk more in a minute about how we measure that. Of course, we can't get through a presentation without talking about AI. And you know, that AI and machine learning have been around for a while, but it really wasn't, I think, until ChatGPT 4 came along that everybody really started to see the huge disruption that AI was going to bring. And you know, right here in 2025, we're kind of almost at the stage of agent-based AI doing things on our behalf. But the next couple of years are going to be really, really interesting, and the rate and pace of things is really accelerating. The current state of AI is really kind of about workflows, automation, decision-making, but it's not yet fully autonomous. There are certain things that there's a lot of you know, work to be done around compliance and making sure things are done in an ethical way and consistent with our policies and so on. But you know, where we're headed is things like self-learning AI, AI-driven API ecosystems, decision-making AI. So you know, as the CIO, I really need to focus on balancing innovation with risk management, making sure we stay compliant, consistent with our ethical AI policies, while also figuring out how to embrace AI for efficiency and automation and productivity across the organization. AI is going to have a significant impact on the skills that we need in the IT department, how the work gets done, and the technology stack itself. In terms of talent, we will probably need fewer software developers. You know, that's kind of an interesting side topic, is we always thought software developer was the one job that AI would never disrupt. Turns out AI is pretty good at writing software. We will probably need things like flow engineers, end-to-end business process engineers, prompt engineers. It'll be a sort of new category of things, people that really understand how your complex business operates end-to-end. IT will become the manager of these AI agents, and those AI agents will become increasingly capable and be able to do more and more over time. And an AI-operated enterprise is going to make us a lot more efficient, but also expose us to some new risks. This is why things like Cisco AI Defense that you heard about earlier today are so important. This is the management system that I use with my team. You know, part of this was developed during COVID and hybrid work to overcome the fact that we're not all in the office together every day. So I have an everyday huddle with my team in the morning. And that is a 30-minute meeting. There's no agenda. It's really just so that we get time together for people to talk about what's top of mind, what's going on in the environment, how was people's weekends, you know, because we're not passing by each other's desks at work anymore. I want to lower the bar or, you know, make it easy for people to bring something up. If you have to wait until a once a week or once a month staff meeting, that's a pretty high bar to raise a concern. If you're talking casually every morning, then you're just getting a lot of face time with the team, even though you're not together in the office. We have a weekly retrospective as a team. What's going well? What's not going well? How do we improve? That's a 45-minute meeting. Once a month, I have a monthly operating review with each of my direct reports. And then once a quarter, we come together in person for an OKR and strategy alignment session and do any adjustments that are needed to the strategy, the OKRs, or otherwise. But this is sort of the management system of how we operationalize things in the IT department at Cisco, at least. Here's how we have defined a sprint and the associated agile ceremonies. A sprint for us is 2 weeks. The product owner does the backlog grooming at the start of each week of the sprint. That then gets broken down into the iteration planning with the whole team. There are 15-minute stand-ups every day. By the way, if you're going to have a stand-up, it can't be an hour long. It's called a stand-up to make sure it's short, because in the old days, everybody would be standing up, and that makes sure that it can't go on for too long. And then at the end of the 2-week sprint, there's a showcase where the team shares what was delivered, and a retrospective with a focus on how do we get better. What went well, what didn't go well, what are we struggling with, how do we improve? And then we repeat that every 2 weeks. And one of the things that that does is your stakeholders really should be coming to the showcase rather than asking you for status all the time. And the blast radius of a misalignment is at maximum 2 weeks, because your stakeholders can then say, actually, that's not what I'm looking for. And you avoid a situation where you've worked on something for a year and then only then find out that it's not what they wanted. Every request in our backlog is looked at as the team does their discovery. They estimate how long it will take to do their work using story points. We use a modified Fibonacci scale ranging from 1 being the smallest to 20 being the biggest. You know, there's not a whole lot of difference between 12 and 13, but there is between 8 and 13, and so that's why. And the whole team is really accountable for the story. And so the value here is not so much in the absolute number of points. The value comes from the team coming together and having the discussion about how complex is this going to be, how difficult is it going to be, how are we going to solve it, and then everybody getting aligned on you know, what the plan's going to be, and driving that alignment is where the real value comes in. Cisco is a fairly large organization. We're about 96,000 employees and about 40,000 contractors. So from an IT perspective, we're supporting a workforce of around 130-odd thousand-ish people and devices. You can see some of the metrics here. I won't read this. The IT department, by the way, is about 10,000 people. Security, you know, like everybody else, we attract a lot of advanced apex predator type threats. Advantage continues to go to adversaries, not to the good actors. We have to be right all the time. They have to just be right once. And so this really becomes an exercise in making sure that we understand our environment and the systems that underpin our environment better than the bad actors that are trying to break in. And we get a lot of help with that, with telemetry, with feeding things into tools like Splunk and being able to do automation against those things. You know, we receive about 6 million emails a day as an example, but we're deleting close to 4 million of those right at the border. 20 billion DNS request lookups per day, 47 terabytes of internet traffic inspected every day. So let's talk about the user experience for a second, and what does it really mean when I say we're leading with the user experience? And you're going to hear from Kristen later on more detail of how that actually gets operationalized. But here's the IT department. Here's how I've organized it. And generally speaking, I like to organize the IT department by system or platform. If you have an experience team, sometimes you can organize by value stream or by experience. That's not how I organize the IT department. I organize generally by platform and system. And so here's a little more detail on what is in each of those things. So if I start at like 1 o'clock on this chart, you've got HRIT, IT finance, business operations in that first wedge. Commerce engineering would be our ERP, Oracle, SAP, finance IT, subscription billing platform, partner systems, configure price quote is in there. Then you've got the device management team, the digital workplaces, things like the intranet, the help desk, your devices, network engineering and infrastructure, self-explanatory, data platforms, IT security and resilience, that's where the firewalls, VPN, EDR, XDR, our SOC, identity management are. Then around 7 o'clock would CRM engineering, that's our Salesforce and CRM team. Above that is change control and release management and our CI/CD pipelines that are used across the engineering teams in IT. Manufacturing and supply chain tools, Cisco licensing, which I know is a popular topic probably in this room. It always gets a lot of feedback. Smart licensing, SmartNet Total Care, old PAC licenses, enterprise agreements, that's all in that product lifecycle IT. And then the IT design and experience team, which I'll talk about in a second. But that's where you've got research, analytics, UI, UX, strategy, content, multimedia, agile, visual design, and that team actually does a lot. But Kristen will talk more about that. But point is, when I became CIO, one of the first changes I made was adding that function to the IT department. And while generally I'm trying to create cross-functional teams by platform and not centralize things, like I don't believe in having a centralized architecture team. I think that stuff is better distributed out into the teams by platform doing the work. Design and user experience is the one thing that I centralize because it's a scarce resource. And first of all, we have to make decisions about how that team's time is most effectively spent. And second of all, it allows for some consistency. We already kind of have the experiment where design can be distributed, and what you get are very uneven results. But it also allows the designers on that team to be members of a design team and not be the lone designer on an infrastructure team. And as I said, when I say design and user experience, I'm talking about a lot more than what something looks like. I'm talking about the research, analytics to make sure you're understanding that research correctly and really solving the right problem, content design, UX, UI, visual design, the full stack of design resources that you need to create an experience. And by the way, what is a good experience in the era of AI is going to be an interesting evolving thing. It's really going to change our perception of what a good experience is. Right now it's mostly prompts and text, but that's going to change. It's probably not all going to be in a browser. It's probably less to some degree about the visual and more about the flow and the words and being able to communicate intent instead of particular actions. And users can tell when you put your heart and soul into building something. And it's important to get that right. If, like in this example, the image on the left, yes, that is not a good user experience. People want things to be simple, intuitive. The days of being able to give somebody a big manual and have a lot of training to do something are over. We have to make these things sort of self-explanatory. Yeah. So if our goal in Cisco IT is to reduce employee friction by half, how do we know if we're making progress on that? Because what you measure is what improves. So we've created a balanced scorecard that we call the Employee Task Friction Index. And here's the math. First, we look at the difficulty. How hard is this thing? And that's done by measuring task completion on a survey of 1 to 5, which gets translated into a percentage of 20 to 100%. Ease of use. So task completion plus ease of use equals difficulty. Then we look at impact. How important is this task? And how often do people have to do it? And you take those two things together, and you get the employee task friction index. I think Kristen will cover this in a bit more detail because there is a little bit more to it, but generally that's the idea. And so if this is a terrible experience that you do once in your whole career at Cisco, maybe it's not at the top of our list. If it's a thing that everyone in the company has to interact with multiple times a day and it's not good, that should really move to the top of our list of things we want to get after right away. Those scores then get surfaced in a dashboard that the design team have created called the Employee Insight Center. That is where we can see the health index of all of the applications that have been instrumented. Right now, it's about 130 of the most common tasks that employees have to do. So if I'm an application owner or I'm a manager, I can go here and see what the application health is for any of the apps that I'm responsible for. And from my perspective, it doesn't so much matter whether something is good or bad, but for the period of time that you are responsible for it, it needs to get better. And the point here is we really use this Insight Center to help us prioritize the backlog. What stuff should we be prioritizing in terms of making things better for employees? And, when you're the CIO, it's very easy to get distracted or completely consumed with big projects like ERP upgrades or CRM consolidations, and but it's those experiences that touch all employees that I really like to pay special attention to, because those are the things that lead people to have a perception about the whole IT function and whether it's well run or poorly run. For a lot of employees, one of the main ways that they will interact with IT, or the main ways that they will experience interacting with IT, is through the intranet. So we need to make sure we get that right, that it's easy to use, and that things on the intranet are set up to be intuitive. So we've done a lot of work on making it easy to get the applications people need, get support, look up other employees. Here's where you can have one-click access to the applications that people need. That is an app store that is integrated into ServiceNow and licensing, and there's a lot of plumbing on the back end, but from an employee perspective, it's one click to get the applications that you need. Looking up people is one of the most common tasks people do on the internet, making that really good. Having that be a LinkedIn-like experience where you can actually figure out who somebody works for and what they do for a living. Making a great mobile experience for those things. That seems obvious, but when I first came into the role, there really was no mobile experience for the employee directory. And then being able to get help, obviously, is another big reason people go to the intranet, and making sure that that is easy. In this example, the employee has uploaded a screenshot of an error that they're getting, and our AI assistant called Bridget, or Bridge IT, is analyzing that image and suggesting a solution to the problem. So the other thing, in the employee space, typically you replace laptops based on age, somewhere between 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. There's a smarter way to do that. For a lot of people, they have no problem holding onto a laptop for a longer period of time if it's working fine for them. So replacing that laptop is actually just friction to somebody who doesn't want a new laptop. In big numbers, people don't want a new laptop all the time. If it's working fine for them, they'd rather just keep it. So we're able to, excuse me, collect telemetry off of the endpoints, things like battery, CPU, disk, memory, and we know if a person's laptop is working well or not. If it's working well, we don't bother them. If it's starting to show signs of having a problem, we'll reach out and say you have to get a new one if it's beyond a certain age. But what it allows us to do is have a policy that says you can actually have a new laptop anytime you want. Because most people don't want a new laptop all the time. The people who do are the people who really benefit from that, engineers, sales engineers, or otherwise. But it allows me to sort of squeeze the money balloon into a different shape and really benefit the population that wants to have the latest and greatest, and in some cases actually even save money. So right now, when you go into our devices portal on the intranet, you will have the option, if you're an employee in good standing, to buy out the laptop that you've been using if you're getting a new one and keep it for yourself or your kids or whatever, because we can remotely over the air deprovision it. This is our hybrid worker bundle. When I first came to Cisco, this is what they sent me. It was basically a router with some complicated instructions. We have done some work to create a really best-in-class consumer-like experience around hybrid work and put together the things that we think deliver an end-to-end secure remote office solution in a way that really only Cisco can. If you think about hybrid work, it's a pretty complicated, you've got remote access, application performance, management across the last mile of the network that we don't manage, endpoint, collaboration, and the kind of end-to-end suite of things that you need. So here's what we include in the bundle: a WebEx device, either the larger screen or the smaller screen, depending on what people want, the laptop, an employee badge if you're a new hire, a wireless access point, a keyboard and trackpad. If you tell us that you have unreliable internet, we'll put a cellular backup gateway in there, and a Meraki MX security appliance, which we will then manage remotely for the employee, all supported by the Cisco software stack of WebEx, Thousand Eyes, Duo, Umbrella, Meraki, Cisco Secure Client, App Dynamics, as well as some custom telemetry that we have implemented. So very often we can tell if a person's having a problem before they even know. And you got to be careful about cause and effect, but the data is when people replace whatever they had in their home before with what we send them, we see lower latency, less packet loss, faster DNS lookup times, things that are probably going to translate to an easier workday and a more reliable meeting experience. These are these help zone kiosks that we've been deploying in our offices. The idea is you go up there, get connected to a remote support advisor. If they can't fix the problem on the phone, they can remotely open one of those lockers and issue a replacement laptop. You can also swipe your badge and buy accessories from the smart kiosk machine. We've deployed a fair number of these already, with more planned for this year. People really like them. It's a nice way to have support available 24/7. We monitor our hybrid workforce through our hybrid work operations center. That's where a lot of the telemetry comes into our NOC. And we're looking at the performance of the public internet, the performance of SaaS tools. We use things like Thousand Eyes to do some of that, but also the performance of people's remote work environments. So let's talk about Agile for a minute. There's really two sides to the Agile coin. One is how you're organized, and the other one is how the work gets done. So we've taken the 12 Agile principles and bookended that with actual hardline org design, reporting chain, KPIs and metrics, and then support that whole program with an Agile coaching function and tooling and metrics and dashboards, which I'll show in a minute. A well-formed team, our definition of a well-formed team is it is cross-functional, it is 6 to 10 people, give or take. It's dedicated to something, and it has all of the skills that they need to put something into production with as few dependencies on other people as possible. And they pull their work from a stable backlog. So that would be developers, testers, a product owner, a Scrum lead, maybe a subject matter expert, maybe a designer, depending what they're working on. Here's how we're organized in IT. Each of the people who report to me are domain leaders. That was what each one of the pieces of the wheel that I showed before are. If I start at the bottom of this chart, groups of 6 to 10 people are an Agile team. A group of Agile teams form a component. They report to a component leader. Groups of component leaders report to component family leaders. They report to a domain leader. Each of my direct reports are a domain leader. Here's our Cisco IT operational health dashboard. So this dashboard is showing who's taken the Agile training, are people checking in with their manager, what's the ratio of employees to contractors, what's the span of control, how many direct reports does each manager have, What's our ratio of doers to enablers, right? People who are hands-on keyboard doing real work versus people who are more coordinators of work. We're an operations team, so we want to keep that ratio pretty low. This dashboard shows, are the Agile teams meeting the definition of well-formed? What are the enablers versus doers ratio on that team? What percentage of that team's work is going to strategic things versus tactical things? What is the health of the backlog? Is the backlog refined and ready for the team to pick up work? Or if that team were to go into the backlog, is the work still waiting for requirements and not really ready for them to pull forward? And then what's the quality? What's the defect rate of this team? This dashboard of metrics I review with each of my leaders each month. It allows us to have really targeted conversations about throughput, velocity, cycle time, backlog health, defect rates, deployments to production, agile maturity of the team. One of the other things we've done is we used to have a lot of different ways that people would give work to the IT department to get done. That created a lot of chaos. It created some feedback like, I give you all my money and I get nothing in return. So now we have one way to give us work. You submit it in Jira Align, the team picks it up, they make sure the requirements make sense and we understand what people are actually asking us to do. It then gets prioritized, estimated for how long it's going to take to do it, and then committed to be delivered on an approximate delivery date, and then that is shared back with the stakeholders. And we are making progress. Throughput, velocity is improving, cycle time is reducing. A lot of that is coming from forming the teams properly, but a lot of that is also on engineering excellence and getting our CI/CD pipelines in order and getting after automation. And so AI, it's an important part of our strategy. It's the third pillar of how we're going to be able to prepare ourselves for the future. And we've spent a lot of time learning how to interact with machines, learning programming languages, figuring out how to get the outcome we need by breaking down that outcome into smaller tasks that we give to a machine, learning things like C++, Python, Java. That's pretty much been the last 100 years of computing. What's changed now is that computers have learned how to talk to us with generative AI. And that's having some really profound impacts on how we interact with machines and the role that they're playing in our lives. And so if computers can now talk to us, the next great programming language is probably English. And by the way, the rate of innovation is really accelerating. It took about 12,000 years to get from the Neolithic period to the Industrial Age. It took about 50 years to get from the Industrial Age to the Information Age. But AI is accelerating that innovation cycle because it is able to self-optimize. If you sort of think, well, it probably feels like we're living in these really modern, futuristic, space-age times, but with the innovation rate going so quickly, we're going to look back on this time in a short amount of time as being like the early Stone Age of AI. 18 months from now, 2 years from now, it's going to be really interesting how much has changed. And that's because normally when you would invent something, you'd build it, you'd put it out there, you'd release it, you'd test it, you'd get feedback from users, then you'd go back and iterate on it, you'd release it again. And so that whole innovation loop takes a while. AI is able to self-optimize and do that in an almost instantaneous and continuous loop. So you have this sort of hockey stick curve of innovation happening. And so if that's the period we're facing, how do we prepare as the IT department? This is a question I get a lot. What is going to change over the next 3 years? That's a hard question to answer, especially when innovation is going as quickly as it is now. And usually those predictions are wrong anyway. I mean, have you ever seen a prediction for 3, 5, or 10 years from now that was right? So I think a better question is, what is not going to change over the next few years? Because you can plan for those things. You can think about what are the things that are going to for sure be stable and not change. It's hard to imagine that we're ever going to live in a time where we don't care about whether employees like working here or not. It's hard to imagine that we're not going to want to have good products. It's hard to imagine that we're not going to want to have licensing that's simpler, and so on and so on. And so you can build a plan around those things. So the pillars of our strategy can be somewhat stable. AI will be a force multiplier for human productivity. We really want to lead with the experience. If you get the experience right, you've solved a whole bunch of other things, and you can work backwards from that. Our core values won't change: trust, transparency, hiring people who love what they do for a living and are kind to each other. And time is really our most precious commodity. If you look at how much time all of us spend at work, we are going to spend about 144 months at work in our life. 60 months of those will be spent on doing administrivia, things that are not really core to your job: email, expense reports, booking travel, scheduling meetings, and so on. You'll spend about 48 months of that time in meetings on average. So that means throughout the life that you will spend at work, 75% of that time is going to be spent on things other than the thing that you said you want to be when you grow up. That's not good. But AI can really help us. We are quickly approaching a time where you can have a digital twin of yourself, and you can focus on the things that are high value, things that you actually wanted to do for a living, and have your AI twin do everything else. That's possible because we don't have to be the interpreter of breaking outcomes down into simple tasks. Instead, we can now communicate intent to these AI systems. So that new world is going to require a lot of AI infrastructure. IT professionals, like all of you, are the ones that are going to build that future. The number of people who actually understand how all of this works is getting fewer, not greater. So IT engineers will sort of become like doctors are to human beings. IT professionals are to the AI infrastructure of the future. Someone has to actually know how all this stuff works and build it and maintain it and take care of it. In Cisco IT, we've been building AI clusters using Cisco Ethernet Fabric, compute, storage, software. We'll build more of that this year, but this stuff is running real production workloads, things like noise cancellation for WebEx, next bestseller action, general employee productivity. You'll hear more about Bridget from Kristen, but this is basically supposed to be the digital equivalent of a friend that you have that has worked at Cisco for 40 years that knows the answers to all things Cisco. So you can go to Bridget today and say, I'm in a conference room that's having bad network performance. Is there an issue going on? I'm a salesperson. Help me write an email to a customer that explains why Cisco firewalls are better than a competitor. When is my laptop due to be replaced? What is the vacation policy in this country? It can find all the answers for that. We've embedded that also into our version of WebEx and soon into a mobile app. Developer productivity, another huge target for AI. Turns out AI is good at writing software. We have made GitHub Copilot available to all of our software developers inside of IT. Hybrid work, whether you're back in the office still fully remote, or some mixture of both, hybrid work in some fashion is here to stay. And by the way, I've looked at all the data. There's no evidence that being in the office has impact on productivity, but there's a lot of evidence that having engaged employees has a good outcome. And so that's sort of the challenge, is how do we engage employees when they're not in the office all the time and avoid some of these unintended outcomes of hybrid work. Feeling like this is a transactional relationship, not being connected to the people you work with, having higher attrition. And there's some interesting things that are happening on the technology front that might help us. We want to have a workforce of patriots, not mercenaries. So how do you bridge the gap between in-person and remote? One of the things we've been experimenting with in Cisco IT is spatial computing, specifically with the Apple Vision Pro. That's a journey, but it offers some interesting hope in what the future of hybrid work might look like. And maybe the whole concept of a meeting gets redefined, and the way that we visualize data and share information and collaborate is evolving. But we're right on the precipice of some really interesting breakthroughs in that space. We do use the AI features of WebEx, things like meeting summaries, catch me up to things I missed. That's really useful for global teams in different time zones. So anyway, wrapping up, these are sort of the key takeaways. Lead with the user experience. When you get the user experience right, a lot of other goodness flows from that. bring the team together to create a clear vision, mission, strategy, then share that with the entire organization, recognize and reward professional pride and operational excellence, create the emotional safety needed to drive innovation, measure the right things. What you measure is what improves, and really be thoughtful about leveraging AI as a teammate, not a team replacement, as a way to 10x everybody's productivity. And with that, thank you very much.